We're going to call this meeting for the Elections Committee to order. Representative Murphy, do you want to do the Pledge of Allegiance for us?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with that being said, there are a couple people who do have additional meetings that they'll be voting on today. So we're going to kind of have people coming and going as we go. So with that being said, we will take the roll for now, but just so people understand, there are other committees that are voting today and people will be coming and going.
Representative Branchin.
Here.
Representative Sanfilippo. Representative Tessler. Representative Seesfeld. Representative Murphy.
Here.
Representative Roser.
Here.
Representative Spreitzer. Representative Subeck. And Representative Emerson.
I think they may be coming later, although I know they had some concerns about caucus being going on today. So one of these days when we have a lot of things going on. So with that being said, we're going to hear from our first guest. I don't know if you want to swing your chairs around. We have Jeff O'Donnell. And Jeff, do you want to kind of go through your bio here so we can hear about your background first?
Certainly. It's an honor to be before you. I appreciate the chance. I have been working in the software database systems analysis field for 40 years now. It's amazing to think that, but yeah, I've worked on large systems for many different companies, including companies like Rockwell International, Westinghouse Nuclear, U.S. Steel, Mellon Bank. I've over the last decade or so, been very much into analyzing large data sets, looking for anomalies, patterns, that sort of thing. That has been a lot of my recent work. I'm expert level at Windows operating system, Microsoft SQL Server, other things as well, but those are the ones that are, I think, most prescient for our discussions. So, again, thank you for having me here.
No, I appreciate it. So if we were to use your documents from today, I think the first page is responses to WEC, the fact items regarding your analysis. Is that correct? Is that the first
Yes.
page? Okay. Is that what you'd like to go to first?
Pardon me?
Is that the first item that you would like to talk about?
Yes. I mean, if you, it's kind of up to you, however you want to direct what I have to say, but I'm prepared to go through that now, if that's what you'd like.
Sure. Is there something else you want to talk about first?
No, not really.
Well, let's go through this responses to the FAQ items on the WEC system, on the WEC Commission's FAQ page.
Yes. Are those being brought up on your side?
They are. I'm sorry, do you need it?
Okay, I just wanted to make sure everyone there
Yeah, we have
could
it as
see.
a printed document.
Okay, very good. The frequently asked questions that were edited had numerous items that appear to be in response to the testimony I gave at a prior hearing, and I wanted the opportunity to address those. And so I have labeled them by how they were labeled in the frequently asked questions on the WEC site. The first question, the first item that I want to get into is, did 200,000 people vote without a photo ID? My response to the information there is that this definitely goes into the indefinitely confined issue. It goes through a great detail of how someone can register to vote to be indefinitely confined. But it still raises some questions. First of all, what is the procedure to verify the witness signatures that the witness, that the voter actually voted for the witness, that sort of thing. That wasn't pointed out in that particular item. In addition, we would like to see an explanation for why those indefinitely combined numbers ballooned so greatly in 2020. We were told, actually, back at the time of the election, that COVID was not an excuse for being indefinitely confined at the time. So, to my mind, that the main questions as to why were there so many indefinitely confined in Wisconsin this particular election remains unexplained. The second item was labeled, were there ghost or phantom voters in Wisconsin's 2020 election? The response to, or the information in the frequently asked question, it calls the argument absurd, which, I don't think that they're in something as important as what we're discussing. I don't believe that it's proper to dismiss any potentially serious issue as absurd. It lists a number of things which are unproven. We see evidence that third parties do have access to the voter rolls and can't alter them. We see no consistency to the 4-year rule being applied. We've found numerous items in the voter rolls from mid 2021 of people, of many people who should have been deactivated due to the 4-year rule who were not. My particular analysis did not deal with deletions, other than it noted the fact that they don't delete, they actually just deactivate, which is something that is done by some states, but by many states, it's a decision the state makes. The rebuttal hinges on the fact that we need to trust that nobody is being able to activate or deactivate voters at the database level. And given the scope of the data issues that we have found and documented in the initial report and the rules, to be very frank, that trust has not been earned. It needs to be earned. As I say, the fact that so many application dates are wrong or defaulted in the voter rolls means that a serious attempt to purge the rolls via that 4-year roll is disingenuous at best. There are 3,808 voters in the voter rolls who are active, were registered before 2016, but have not voted since before 2016. They should have been removed via the 4-year rule, but they still exist. Did all 3,808 of these voters reply to a request to stay on? That is, a valid question that needs to be answered. I have personally discovered, and I think you'll hear other evidence later of thousands of what I'm calling phantom voters who did vote in the 2020 general election. So to me, that item is not adequately handled either. Getting to why did Milwaukee County report so many ballots for Democrats in the middle of the night? There's a lot of logical inconsistencies in this frequently asked questions answer. They compare to 2016, and I'd just say that a comparison to 2016 is only valid if we stipulate that we consider 2016 to have potentially been fair, and we've made no such assertion one way or the other in anything that we've given. They take a lot of discussion of third-party numbers and a thing which does seem irrelevant in the explanation. But as I point out, the fact remains the Milwaukee County vote dump at 5:51 a.m. was the largest single update of votes in the state, with 211,196 combined votes for Trump and Biden. It was also the single most Biden heavy. By that, I mean that particular update had the highest percentage of Biden votes, which was 80.2% of updates of more than 2,000 total votes in the entire state. As I said, if that restriction is the 2,000, the restriction is it made only one small county update exceeded that 80.2%. Only Dane County's updates, 78.5, 76.3, and 74.7, a total of 338,946 votes, came close to the 80.2 in that dump in Milwaukee. And it's another way of expressing the single update contains 83% of all Biden votes from Milwaukee County, but comprises just 52% of the total county votes for the entire election. So to my mind, that middle of the night update looks extremely out of line with what you would expect to see, and should have further examination, investigation to it. There's an item where voting equipment updates caused the loss of data and IP logs containing evidence of fraud for the November 2020 general election. I included a response to this because I have done extensive work with specifically Dominion systems from other counties across the country. And from what we have seen, when they update to 5.13 trusted build, as they call it, it is a complete wipeout of the hard drive. So to say that nothing is lost by the update is simply, to me, not an accurate statement. And if data is not securely and completely backed up before that update, it's gone. It's irretrievable. Additionally, so to go specifically to the IP logs, everywhere that we've had a chance to examine a Dominion election management server, the settings in Windows are set so that all of the Windows logs are set to such a small size, only 10 or 20 megabytes in size, so that they roll over, they wrap around, overwrite each other within a few days. So we have yet to see one where that was not the setting. And in case you're wondering, that is not the default setting for Windows. That's definitely has to be changed after Windows Server is installed. The item did thousands of voters fail driver's license checks because they're not real people and possess fraudulent licenses. There is significant evidence in numerous reports that are not specifically rebutted by this, of indeed that happening. I wanted to highlight the HAVV registrations. You're probably familiar with that. That is a system whereby a voter who wants to register who does not have proper ID can provide their name and last four of their social security number. They then submit that to the HAVV system run by, I guess, Social Security Administration, who will return whether there's a match on that name and the last four of the social security number. We found that Wisconsin had over 2,800 of these checks denied for non-match reasons, meaning that the social security number, the last four given, did not match the name. I also include a graph showing the run-up to around the election. You can see the dates on the bottom. Those are all 2020. The graph shows the massive, first of all, increase in these HAVV queries. And in the yellow, you can see the increase in ones that did not match. If you think about the fact that for someone to even go through that system, if the system is being used properly, someone who comes in that has the fairly simple ID requirements would never have to go through this. So the fact that so many more did and so many of them were rejected is a point of concern. And you know, they're saying they haven't received a substantiated report of people misrepresenting their identity. I present that graph and that information to make that statement no longer true. Every single one of those people represented in those yellow lines represented themselves with a name and last four of the social, which did not match. Why does the statewide voter registration database include multiple voters with birth dates of 1/1/1900 and registration dates of 1/1/1918? On this one, I felt, since a few days after my initial testimony, I felt particularly attacked on this one. The answer in the frequently asked questions is extremely calm and indicates that it's a small problem coming from very small places of less than 5,000 voters that did not keep this information before. And so whenever they did their big merge in 2006, that information wasn't there. So the information got defaulted. Well, to me, that does not hold water as you know, an expert looking at numbers and that there are in mid-21 voter rolls 569,277 total registrations with the application date of January 1st, 1918. That is 1 out of every 14 voters in the system. So, you know, if you're Wisconsin, go out on your street, look up and down the street, you probably have at least one person there, but at least in that. Now, that is both inactive and inactive voters. If you just look at the active, you have 119,283 with that registration date, and 115,252 of them voted in November. This does not seem to be consistent with a 15-year-old issue involving small towns. Even if this merge excuse was valid, it would seem that while birth dates may not have been required, dates of application and registration should always be maintained. Otherwise, it's impossible to purge the rolls of inactive voters. You can't have a 4-year policy if you don't know when person registered or applied in this case. If the critical information was not transferred to the central rolls in 2006, what steps have been made in the intervening 16 years to recover and fix this data? This was before the first iPhone was sold. I feel that the data like this, information like this, or the lack of it in this particular case, it just shows a disregard for transparency, for openness. And then the Wisconsin have duplicate voter registration numbers. I don't feel that this section really answers the questions that I and others have asked. I stipulated in mine that they were actually alphanumeric fields as opposed to truly digital fields. They make the case that they did it so that they would have the ability to have a lot more registrations. But then why out of 7 million records are only 16 not numeric? It does not answer also why registration numbers of different lengths and what those mean, and why they're sometimes sequential, and why sometimes they're in no discernible pattern. Why new registrations are sometimes placed in the middle, if you do look at them numerically, of other ones. So in order for people to have any kind of confidence in this process, we need an explanation of who creates the registration numbers. The fact that you have different lengths being put in, evidently different standards, indicates to me that this is most likely from different sources. And two, what established procedures exist for each of these entities regarding creation of new registration numbers? This issue remains unanswered and very troubling. I have noted in my examination of this that online registration does tend to be, those tend to be more logical and sequential as the others, but that still leaves a very large amount of unexplained processes that are used. I did have a page for some additional concerns that were not addressed in their additions to their fact page. And that is why are there 26,259 active voters who voted in November, but they have application dates after November 4th, 2020, We're not talking about merges back 15 years ago now. We're talking about recent, very recent history. And why are there many voters with multiple active registrations? And there are many who voted twice in November 2020, and is that being properly investigated? And I believe there'll be more information presented by others on that particular point. So that was my responses to what was put in the frequently asked questions section. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have to the best of my ability.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I appreciate it very much. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
I think Representative Murphy, were you first?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, you're not ready?
So the 4-year rule on taking voter registrations off the rolls.
They're not off the rolls, they're just deactivated.
Deactivated.
Thank you.
If that's not applied consistently, could you make a case that that voters are not, that other voters are not getting equal protection under the law because their vote is being disenfranchised by somebody that's, I mean, is that an appropriate way to look at it?
If that was directed, there's a way to make the gentleman louder.
Can you try again, Murph?
Yeah, so what's happening is you're on the screen, so I'm looking at you on the screen, but that's looking away from the microphone. So probably you'll hear me much better now. I was asking about deactivating voters from the voter registration. And I was asking about the fact that if that's not done consistently, is that a violation of equal protection under the law? Because if a voter is disenfranchised by that, are they not being equally protected?
Jeff, are you an attorney? Jeff, you're not an attorney, are you? I'm not either.
I am not, but it sounds like a common sense sort of violation of that, because the person who was deactivated simply because they just didn't get around to voting for the last 4 years for whatever reason, but still maintains an interest and wants to be able to, versus, that is deactivated and has to go through a process then to vote. And isn't that the whole idea here, is to try to make voting as easy for everyone as possible? You have put a burden on one person that you did not place on another, which by my understanding is the crux of the equal protection.
So, Chairman Branson, I'm trying to understand maybe how we go about dissecting this testimony and how we go about questioning it. And I'm wondering if we should do it like a section at a time. I mean, I have other questions, but then they go to different things. I'm just wondering if we should stay on one topic until we do all the questions in that area before we move on to the next.
Do you think that would be?
I think that makes the most sense to me.
Okay. Does that work?
You're the boss, so.
I have a more general question, perhaps it might be better addressed for the chair anyway.
Sure.
Which is, the speaker referenced other speakers who will be speaking later. And this is the first time I've been in an informational hearing with invited guests where we didn't have a list at the start of the hearing. I understand that Representative Murphy had asked at the beginning of the hearing about speakers and that hasn't been answered. I'm wondering if you can tell us, please, who else is speaking that might help shape our questions and who we might ask what.
No problem. So you have Jeff O'Donnell, you're going to have Jay Valentine, and then you're going to have Dan Eastman. So there'll be 3 speakers today. We unfortunately had some illnesses, and so we had a little shifting around here.
And the other gentlemen that you mentioned, are they representing organizations or are they speaking
They're
as
coming in
individuals?
on a professional basis. As I know you weren't here at the beginning, but Mr. O'Donnell has a long history.
That I'm familiar with, because I've seen him before.
Okay.
But Mr. Valentine and Mr. Eastman, can you just tell us what they're,
I'll make-
again, trying to shape questions here. I'm thinking,
So, yeah,
are
Mr.
they-
Valentine is another data expert. And Mr. Eastman is an attorney as well as government relations. And, I mean, there's nobody here from an organization per se.
Sure, okay, that's
Does that help?
just helpful to know. I
Sure.
thought it was unusual not to have that information coming.
Madam Chair, I need to step away for a moment, but I will be actually.
Okay. Got to do that voting, huh? All right. With that being said, is that your general question?
That was my question. That was all I had at this.
Well, since, I mean, do you want to go page by page or, okay. 200,000 people vote without a photo ID. Are there any questions to that? Representative Roser. And you need to ask it to the microphone.
Yeah, I know, but I just wanted to tell him that he's gonna be looking at my back while I
Okay.
questions. So, thank you for this presentation. I have a question about this 200,000 people that voted under the indefinitely confined category. Can you tell me give me a perspective of how many people usually vote with indefinitely confined so I can get an idea of what a jump in?
Sure, actually the number was 270, closer to.
Okay,
70,000 had been the previous list.
okay.
And I think he's referring to 200,000 new indefinite confined for the 2020 election. So altogether 200,000 new.
Okay,
And
that
if you
was-
went to the LAB report, I think the number was 48,000 roughly, who had never voted before, marked themselves indefinitely confined and voted in the 2020 election.
That's exactly what I was looking for.
There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
That all go, if you read it all together, you become a nerd.
Yeah, I was just trying to put that number in perspective so that I would know just how.
How many
big of
we're
a
talking about.
percentage,
Yep.
Extra we're talking about. Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions on the 200,000? All right, let's then go to, were there ghost or phantom voters in the 2020 election? Any questions? Jeff, thanks for your patience. All right, we will then go to, why did Milwaukee County report so many ballots and Democrats in the middle of the night? I do, Mr. O'Donnell, I do want to let you know that both Milwaukee uses a central count process, meaning that all the ballots are gathered all day long until at the end of the evening when all the ballots are in, and then they actually run the machines. Unlike Madison, which manages everything by their wards or by their different wards, so they're coming in all the time. Milwaukee uses a central count, which means hundreds of thousands of ballots are gathered until that last moment. They hit the machine totals and then they come forward. But you're right, the numbers are substantial for Biden at that process. Any other questions? Go ahead.
I was just going to say thank you, Madam Chair, for clarifying that, because I do think it's important to note that these ballots aren't showing up in the middle of the night, that they take some time to count because they are counted centrally. And I think it's important for anybody who's coming in and claiming to be an expert to know that. So thank you for pointing that out.
Oh, no problem. Any other questions? Go ahead.
Question I had, and I think I know the answer, I just don't know if it's correct or not. When those ballots come into those central count municipalities, when do they begin counting them? Does the rest of all the other precincts have to be closed up and finished and then they start them? Or
They start at 7 a.m.
7 a.m.
that day on election day.
So they're doing that well before?
All day,
Okay.
all day long.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Sure.
So are there runners back and forth from the polling places, just continually bringing ballots in that they've accumulated and then they count them?
So best job, make sure I'm trying to be clear. Milwaukee, as I understand it, the central count has all of the absentee ballots, that are coming in over the weeks. Remember, you have 6 weeks, I do believe, in a regular election to mail these in. They all go from all of the wards to the central location. They're open that morning, and then they start processing. And they have a pretty elaborate system. It's about the size of a football field, and quite a few. And then in the wards themselves, they're doing in-person elections, and those come in by the wards differently. Does that make sense?
After the polls close, do all of those
Oh.
ward ballots come in?
As soon as they're done counting. As soon as the wards are done.
Only absentee ballots are counted at central count. The polling places each do their own count.
For
Their
their
own
own
People who
in-person.
voted there,
Thank
yes.
you.
Okay.
Sorry, I think
Yes.
that was a disconnect there.
Yes, okay. Okay.
Will voting equipment, does that answer all our questions? Will voting equipment updates cause a loss of data and IP logs containing evidence of fraud from the 2020 general election? I appreciate your expertise on the Dominion here and some of the way that they're managed. Are there any questions? All right. We will go to, did thousands of voters fail the driver's license check because they're not real people and possess fraudulent licenses? Any questions? All right. Yes,
Could we go back to the previous question?
sure. That would be the IP logs.
Yes.
Okay.
And I wasn't in here for that, so that's why I'm a little behind.
Sure, no.
So,
Ask the question in the microphone. I think
yeah.
Mr. O'Donnell can help.
So the answer at the bottom here, I assume, is the answer that he has given to this question. So I believe your answer, Mr. McDonnell, is that the upgrade, it says there, entails a complete overwriting of the election management server's hard drive. So that would mean those IP logs would be gone, would be lost. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I have right now. Just wanted to make sure of that. Thank you.
No problem. Did thousands of voters fail a driver's license check because they're not real people and possess fraudulent licenses? And you have a graph here.
So I have a question, Madam Chair.
Sure.
And this is just for my education. So is running this check with the driver's license, is that just a double check that we have built into our election process to double check a person's identity?
Well, there's no double checking the driver's license, and if you don't possess a driver's license, you have a voter ID, or you may use the last 4 digits of your social security number as a way to validate who you are on election day. And if you're voting in person, if you're voting online, you must have some sort of identification unless you mark yourself indefinitely confined. Does that sound appropriate?
Yes. So do they just randomly run that information to make sure that a person is a real person? Or do they do it for people that register the same day to check their, explain to me when you would run a driver's license check?
Sure.
Verification.
Sure, go ahead.
I'm sorry. One count happens when a person registers to vote online through the WISC vote program. And that has to be a perfect match in order for the registration to go through online. The other kind happens after someone registers to vote on paper, either before the election or on election day. And the clerks run the check afterwards, and then they will get an indication of whether there's a match or a mistake.
So if there's not a match,
Mhm.
then there's a question about fraud or this person not being a real person.
So the problem becomes on election day and the days prior to the vote, after the Badger books have been run, those are what the clerks use. There is no real-time system on those days, including election day, for clerks to determine if you are a new voter and you write down your driver's license, if there's any way to determine that if it's a appropriate license. Okay, is it fictitious? Is it real? So we have these numbers, 6,500. Every election going forward, we do have numbers. And I think the last 3 elections, it's almost 20,000 individuals that don't match. The clerks by law are required to send a postcard, but that does not mean that they are made inactive off the ballot. So we accumulate these people over many years that do not have matched driver's license information. And what he's referring to here is this 20, and he has it as Help America Vote. But yes, that is the point, that you're supposed to determine by a driver's license, voter ID, last 4 digits is your social security. I'm being correct when I say that those are the things that we're supposed to determine if you're a voting individual in the state of Wisconsin.
So that vote is counted.
Yes, it is.
And so if there's no match, they don't take that vote away. That
No, they do
vote
not.
is still counted.
The clerks have 60 days after an election to put this information into the system. And so, during that 60 days is when they'll find out after they have given up the ballot. So it's definitely a shortfall, if you ask me, in the state of Wisconsin. We certainly want to make it easy to vote, but it is unfortunate that we have not enabled the clerks with a process to determine this, just like we do on the weeks prior to the election. Go ahead, Representative.
So, first of all, I just want to clarify, because you mentioned voter ID in there. Voter ID is not for registration. That's when you vote, you have to physically show an ID. That is separate from the process of putting the last 4 digits of your social security number or your driver's license number on your registration form. So those are 2 separate things, which in some ways creates 2 checks, I guess, because you have to check when you're registering, but then you also have to show an ID when you vote. Whether I believe you should have to do that or not, that is currently the case in our state, which does perhaps provide some level of comfort in that scenario for folks who are looking for that level of comfort. I guess that I don't know if the speaker can address this or not, but I do think that, sometimes these are errors and that there's some level of investigation that happens afterward. And then if people are found to actually not match, to actually not be a real person, as you put it, or who they said they were, prosecution occurs at that point. And there are very few of those prosecutions, because so often I think this is not because somebody's falsifying their situation, but simply due to perhaps a handwriting discrepancy or an entry error that they don't match. That's why they send the postcards and do the things that you spoke of. So I guess that what I'm wondering is how many folks are prosecuted? How many of these instances actually turn out to be false, as opposed to some level of human error or handwriting or other issues such as that?
So there are 3 different ways so it is done by your name, your birth date, and it is done by your driver's license. 95% of the folks are using driver's license. Jeff, can you tell me, is the 2,800 number, you failed all 3? Or I'm trying to remember, is that, because there's some people that fail their name, some people that fail their name and their driver's license, some people that fail their name, their driver's license, and their birth date. So it might be hard to prosecute people if all 3 of those things are not available or don't make sense. So Jeff, is the 2,800 all 3 fail, or are you not sure?
The information that is provided by SSA.gov, Social Security Administration, only lists that subset of voters who had got to the point where they did the check of the name and last 4 of the social.
Okay, all right. Well,
So it just came up as a non-match, which can happen. Because this is being purported as a big indication of fraud, I think it's important to note that a non-match is not necessarily an indication of fraud. And that same voter, if they're registering on election day, is turning around and showing a valid identification for voting that may or may not be a driver's license or state ID card, because we do have some other options, but they are turning around and using an ID when they vote. So a non-match does not necessarily mean, as you put it, not real people, right? These can be real people who, due to some error or due to some system thing, glitch, error, whatever you want it to be, end up not matching. That's not an indication of fraud. That's not saying we have 2,800 fraudulent votes, which is, I think, what you're implying here.
If I can make a comment to that.
Sure.
Of course, the internal procedures would have to be looked into. But this HAVV check is intended to be the last line of defense, as it were. Whether it's being used differently in Wisconsin is something I don't have information to. If a person has valid and verifiable driver's license, other information, there should be no need for an HAVV check. I just think it's important to understand that. I also think it's important to understand that 2,800 is an awfully large number for human error. And as with almost everything in my reports, I'm merely pointing things out that need more investigation. And I would still certainly put this into that category.
Fair enough. That being said, can we move on to why does the statewide database include multiple voters with birth dates of 1/1/1900 and registration dates of 1/1/1918? Questions? And if I'm to read this, you're saying 119,000 of these were marked active. Oh, I take that back. 115,000 voted in November. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, okay. That is correct.
All right. Any questions? Does Wisconsin have duplicate voter registration numbers? Questions? I guess you've answered that, Jeff. What is the number on that of duplicate? Is it like 157,000? Does that sound correct?
Yes, yes, there are. I have not specifically addressed that because that was not the crux of my particular argument when I appeared before.
Okay. But your issue is that the numbers, that some numbers are 7 digits, 8 digits, 9 digits. We have basically voter numbers that have all kinds of sequencing concerns.
It is the inconsistencies that are the troubling parts, at least to me.
Last page with additional concerns. Oh, I'm sorry, Representative Eastman.
So, Mr. O'Donnell, did you have any indication that these gaps in the registration numbers or inconsistency, but that's been going on for years, or is it just a recent invention?
From my analysis, it's actually been going on for years. I would say if there's any trend, and don't take this as an absolute, but it appears to me that it was actually worse in years past. Not that it's still not what I would consider to be very, very way too many now. It does appear to me that this was even more commonplace in the past than it is now, indicating to me that perhaps some change has been made recently that has slightly lessened the occurrence of this, but has not done away with it.
Are you able to describe how you came to that conclusion, how it maybe was worse before?
Yeah, analyzing, I have to put a caveat here. Part of what I am saying in these reports is that the application dates, which are necessary to be able to do this kind of analysis, I do not feel that I, as a data scientist looking at it, can necessarily trust any of the application dates because of the large number of ones that are defaulted, the ones that occur after people voted, that sort of thing. However, if you take the application dates as the ones that appear right or right, when I did an analysis of where those missing and gaps are, in years past, I encountered more, there are thousands and thousands of gaps. Okay, there's a lot of, of course, there's 7 million records, so they're right. So it was just my observation that I guess I can turn this around and say that I see a few more, I see more sequential now than I used to. And I believe that may be because of the general trend toward online registration or online application. Because I said the online applications do seem to be more rational in how they're put in. Whereas, and that's probably increasing as we get closer to current day. That could very well be the explanation why, I see a little bit more conformity recently than I did in years past.
So am I making a correct assumption when you say in years past, that means that you've been examining this data for years, going back previous elections?
No, what I mean is that from years past is that when I look at the application date, if you look at people whose application dates were, for instance, in the 1990s and 2000s and 2010s, I just have it's my observation that I tend to see more gaps back then than I do, say, in the 2020s or late 2010s. Again, it's not an observation; it's nothing that's been quantified, but it's based on what I've seen. It certainly hasn't. It's just it's only a trickle less. But I'm just trying to be as open with my observations as I can.
Okay. Any further questions? The additional concerns page, the last 26,000 active voters who voted in 2020 but have application dates after 11/4/2020. And then the multiple active registrations, voting twice. Jeff, do you have any other things that you want to mention to us, or should we wrap this up?
Well, something occurs to me. The reason, if anybody's wondering why I used 11/4 rather than 11/3, was I was allowing for the possibility that there may have been some cleanup, entering some registrations on the 4th. So anybody's wondering why I use that term, I do know when the election was, just in case anybody was wondering.
Thank you very
Other than
much.
that, I think I've presented what I wanted to present.
Jeff, thank you very much for your time today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. We're gonna hang up on you and use the next call. Sorry.
Thank you.
And I am hoping that we have that next call queued. Did I lose? Where's my tech folks? I think we're hanging up on you, Jeff.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay. Uh-oh, did we lose? There we go. There's Jay. Okay. Jay, can we hear you? Can you hear us?
Can you hear me okay?
We sure can. Can you hear us?
I sure can. I see you all very, very well.
Well, great.
And have you set it up so that I can share my screen?
Have I set it up that you can what?
Share my screen.
Yeah, I think we have you on paper today because I guess I'm not as data experts as you, so we have paper today. Which one did you want to work first with? Jay, why don't you tell us your background first?
So it says that the host has disabled participant screen sharing. If you allow screen sharing, then I can kind of walk you through that.
Where is our tech people when we need them, Matt, right? How could he leave us on our
It's
own?
at whoever's doing it, it's at the very bottom of the screen. There's something called security. You go to security, it's a little shield. And on that shield, you just say enable screen sharing.
Where is he? Do you see where the computer is? And this is exactly why we need data experts. Do you want? Oh
So if
man,
you
you're
move
showing
your
off.
cursor to the bottom of the screen, there's a shield that says security.
Do you want to call Pat?
Oh, there it is.
I think we can be removed from the computer.
Here we go.
Yeah.
Does he have something on his screen?
Yeah, it looks like we're getting away from ourselves here. Perhaps we'll just turn that session off here. Okay. So what we can do, oh, there we go. Look at that. We share our screen just right. Very good.
Oh, that's funky.
Ooh, ah.
Your screen saving?
It's like magic.
All right, Jay, I think we have you on now.
You do.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure we were able to do this, and we will, you can see my screen. You can see my beautiful picture of Portsmouth, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And you can see something called the WEC FAQ January 2022, correct?
Yes. Can you turn them up a little louder?
Okay. So this way I can kind of walk you through the exhibits you have in your hand, because I'm going to be jumping around the screen a little bit.
Can you be a little louder?
Representative and
Jay, can you be
I'm
a little
sorry?
louder? Yeah.
sure.
There we go. Thank you. Matt, you get A+ for thank you.
Jay Valentine.
Is that better?
That's way better. Thanks, Jay.
Okay. So thank you for the invitation to speak to your group. I am Jay Valentine. I reside in the Austin, Texas area, and I have reviewed the WEC frequently asked questions posted in January of this year concerning voter registration information for Wisconsin.
Jay,
I'm going to show you some.
Jay, can you give us a little background about yourself?
I'm going to be doing that.
Okay.
My expertise is in applying disruptive technology to solve problems where large databases may be involved. I'm the president of a group called Contingency Sales, which is an investment company with a portfolio in fractal programming, in fraud detection, and in personal profiling. I led the team that built the eBay fraud detection engine, stopping online auction fraud with a new technology that enabled eBay to identify fraudulent individuals who were stealing from eBay members, then changing all of their identifiers to avoid detection, rejoining eBay, and then causing the fraud again. The success of this particular endeavor was written up in the eBay annual report as the key fraud technology that helped save their brand and was featured in Forbes magazine. Our team built the first general purpose similarity engine, which was used not only for auction fraud, but is today the foundational technology for the TSA no-fly list. Our technology enabled the government to detect bad actors who modified their names and personal information in massive databases to avoid detection. We were engaged by firms such as the National Insurance Crime Bureau, GEICO, USAA, State Farm, and other major insurance carriers to identify auto auction fraud rings where neural nets, link technology, and other fraud systems were not able to see the type of fraud being perpetrated. I have reviewed the Wisconsin voter registration data, in particular dated in August of 2021. And our team, and we looked at related databases, and I have provided 2 reports to Representative Branchen. And today I'm going to be talking about the second of those reports. Our team used a new database technology called fractal programming to review these significant databases and run tests on their best practices. In early January, I sent this report to the committee, to the Representative Branchen. And today we're going to be talking about our response to some of the frequently asked questions posted by WEC. My testimony today concerns those FAQs. So I draw your attention to the screen or to the one in your hand, which you see the red underlinings. This particular FAQ is a summary with 3 different parts of the FAQ. And I want to draw your attention to the first line. Wisconsin voter registration numbers consist of 9 characters, which are alphanumeric. They use the term voter registration numbers. And we're going to be using that term here as we get into, are these really voter registration numbers? Do these numbers really do what numbers are supposed to do? Or are perhaps they open to cause massive confusion to computers and to people? And let's examine that. WEC uses the term voter registration number underlined in red. We're going to use that term, number, quote, number, in our short presentation, understanding that WEC's number claims to be an alphanumeric string. A key concept to both WEC, as stated in their FAQ, and to the Wisconsin citizens, is that each voter has a unique identifier. So every voter in Wisconsin has a unique identifier called a voter ID, and we're going to look at those a little bit today. No 2 voters should ever have the same voter ID. So I draw your attention to the definition of number. So now I'm going to bring up something, and while this seems rudimentary, I think this is going to be important in our examination of what's really going on here. When we look at the definition, and here it's American Heritage Dictionary, but any dictionary will get you there. The concept of a number has some key characteristics in the world of data processing and IT and looking for truth in data. One is that a number must manifest a symbol of unique meaning. And a symbol of unique meaning means that every time you see it, you know exactly what it is. Any numbering system notes value in such a way that the number 35 or the string of 35 is never the same as 43. Of course, we all know that. A voter ID number means that every number, even if that number is string, must apply to one and only one voter. Humans and computers must be able to identify that 2 different numbers apply to 2 different voters. As we're going to demonstrate, the WEC numbering system scheme fails this test. The second thing I'm going to draw your attention to, again on the screen you're looking at, is fixed order. What is order? Order means that the number 24,502 always comes after the number 1 when sorted in that sequence. This is obvious to anyone. So if you take a sequence of numbers and you sort in an ascending fashion, you will have 1 and then 2 and then all the way up to 24,000. We all know that. The human mind and virtually all computer programs sort numbers, so they will have these characteristics, and it is in the definition of number. Order means humans and computer programs can sort voter ID numbers, whether strings or not, in such a way that those who registered in 1965 should always appear before those who registered in 2021. The WEC numbering system fails this test for a numbering system. I draw your attention to the third one, derived by counting. Derived by counting means that any human being or computer program should be able to go to two numbers, for instance, 25 and 30, and determine a countable set of numbers in between 25 and 30. We all know this. In this case, it would be 4. The number 26, 27, 28, and 29 would appear between 25 and 30. Some systems count by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8. Some systems count by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20. Some by 10s, 10, 20, 30, 40. But in every one, you know what the next number is. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. 5, 10, 15, 20. We know what the next number is. All of these numbering sequences can be derived by counting, not, however, for WEC, as we shall see in a moment. The WEC system also fails this test. Before we examine these 3 tests of what it means to actually be a number, whether that number is a string or not, let us visit the concept of a string. WEC notes that its numbering system is alphanumeric string. A string is different from an actual number in that a string is processed somewhat like a sentence, all the characters being read together. We agree that WEC's voter ID number system uses a string that appears to be a number. That, however, does not change the fact that it is a voter ID number and it must comply with all of the basic concepts of what a number is supposed to do. WEC, by its own admission in the FAQ, notes that this string, alphanumeric in nature, is used as a numbering system, thus must meet the basic requirements of a numbering system, which we just reviewed. And as we'll see in a moment, it does not. So let's review these 3 concepts. We're going to look at them in detail. The first concept we want to look at, and this came up in Jeff's presentation as well, is the concept of what the voter ID number actually looks like in WEC. This is an example of the string that you would see for WEC. It is one example of hundreds of different ones. Now, you will see the number 717-82-990. To a human being and to most conventional technology, these voter ID numbers from WEC would appear to be the same. To almost any computer system, if it looked at these 2 numbers, it would say they are the same. And these are 2 voter ID numbers. To a human auditing the WEC system, they would likely find these to be the same number. WEC so much as admits this on the WEC page. If you go back to the first example, WEC talked about the confusion that is brought to both human beings and to computers because of their numbering system. However, to WEC, these are different numbers, and these numbers are different voter IDs. So for virtually any type of computer system, Microsoft Excel, any of the types of systems that are out there, looking at this, you would see these are identical. WEC would see these as different. That's a problem. Now, is this a trivial example? Our team found over 145,000 examples of voter IDs, which WEC claims are unique to only one person, and that any human and most computer systems would find to be duplicates. We reported this in our earlier report, the first of 2, to the committee. Why would anybody use a numbering system that is inherently unable to be audited by humans or computers? What was that WEC's only choice? We think not. Let us remember that WEC has over 700 million different numbering choices in its current ID system. And WEC only has just under 8 million people it has to track. So you have 7 million choices. You have 8 million people, and yet they come up with a numbering system, which to most humans and most computers, by WEC's own notation on its FAQ, are confusing and would not be interpreted, as we have seen before, the same way. WEC chose not to use a conventional numbering system. WEC has deliberately chosen to use a numbering system that does not denote unique value, at least not to most humans and not to most computer systems, and it admits that on its FAQ page. Don't take our word for it. Look at the FAQ page in the first exhibit. WEC's numbering system fails the single most basic requirement of any numbering system. It fails to deliver a symbol of unique value, except perhaps to people within WEC who are the only ones who can tell you that these two numbers are identical or different. And we have an admission of that because WEC has said on its website that this is confusing. Further on their website, as you have seen in the first exhibit, WEC has said that their system is actually not even a number, it's a code. So if they have a code as opposed to a number, how is a citizen supposed to find out if these two people are different individuals or the same individual? How is anybody supposed to audit something like this? It is virtually impossible. The second thing that we talked about in terms of what are the key characteristics of a numbering system is fixed order. 25,000 always comes after 1 in ascending sequence. Humans and computers sequence times of day to sort according to what came first. So we know things in the morning came before things in the afternoon. That's the way our brain works. We sort things alphabetically. We sort the people in our phone alphabetically or reverse alphabetically. We sort is essentially the derivative of fixed order. It is the very definition of a numbering system. Let's see how WEC does it. Let's go to exhibit number 4. Exhibit number 4 is an example of a screenshot taken with fractal programming using conventional type of sorting in the WEC database. And I'm going to share with you what these columns are. So in the column on the left-hand side starts with 5.4 million people. That is the sort number for every voter in the state of Wisconsin. So this top individual, Macy, her sort number is 5,440,337. Then it goes 338, 339, 40 as you would expect. The lower left-hand corner, you see the number 7,098,446. That's how many people are in the set. To the right of that, you see a number 340,000. That's the page number. So we're looking at page number 340,000 of 7 million. Now let's take a look up here. Let's look at these voter registration numbers. The voter registration number in the top starts with the 07. I believe that to be 71 million. Whatever that number is, you can see we go from 90 to 100 to 110 to 120 to 130 to 140. You can see behind the yellow line here. Those are clearly voter ID numbers assigned by some type of machine. So a computer would assign those, which is interesting. They have an order to them. In this particular case, WEC is saying, well, sure, numbers should have order. Let's put order here, 90, 100, 10, 20, 30, 40. We're going to see that they have order in some places, but they choose to not have great disorder in other places. But now let's look at the next number. The next number is 1. So what we have done is we have sorted the voters in the great state of Wisconsin, here in the left-hand column, from the first to the last, according to how WEC presents them. We are sorting here, and we can see we're in the 70 million range, and then comes the number 1. Well, only here would the number 1 come after the number 70 million. Why? Why? Why would the number 1? What codes are there in that number that we can't see? Why is it that that code would ever come there? Well, who knows? We certainly don't. Perhaps WEC does, because like they said, they don't use numbers, they use codes. But these are codes that, as they have said on their own website, which I gave you in exhibit number 1, these cause confusion to both humans and to computers, and they did here. Let's go a little deeper. The next one is a date field. You can see 10/10/2008. Here's another date field, 11/7/2006. Here's another date field. How did those date fields get in there? Well, they didn't get in because a computer generated the next number. They get in because somebody went in, some human being went in, because computers don't decide that we're going to skip from the number 7187740 to the number 1. And now, just for fun, let's put in a date field and see what our owners think about it. It doesn't work like that. These were put in by human beings. Who and why did they do that? Well, there may be reasons, maybe non-sinister reasons, but whatever they are, we as citizens looking at this have no ability to tell. Why do we use different types of date fields? Here we use this kind of date field with the slash mark. Here we use a different date field. And down here we have the number 122, then 125, 136 in the proper order, 122, then to 125, then to 136, their growing order. And yet they are coming after 71 million. So as you can see, when we're looking at the data within WEC's own databases, and this is not an outlier. There are hundreds of examples we could show that are similar to this. There are pages and pages and pages of examples, others of which we have given you in some of the reports. That this is something indeed that is a code that is impossible or almost impossible for traditional computers and for human beings to be able to make sense of. So let's look at the next concept, which is derived by counting. Reviewing this particular exhibit, and let us look at exhibit number 5. What do we mean by counting? Reviewing this exhibit, one sees that WEC abides by some primitive ways of counting. So let's go take a look at that. Here's a voter registration number, 42, 44. If we closed our eyes, what would the next one be? 46, closed our eyes. What would the next one be? 48, closed our eyes. What would the next one be? 50, but it's not. It's 49. Somebody put in another voter number. Who? Why? So we have even numbers, 42, 44, 46, 48, odd number, 49. The next number should be 50 because it goes 48, 49, 50. But no, here WEC starts adding 2's again, 51. The next number should be then add 2, 53, but it's not, it's 52. So as you can see, you cannot use a counting technique, a technique where counting is used. You cannot use that, which is a very basic concept of numbers, to figure out what WEC is doing. So one of the other things WEC talks about, again, on their FAQ page, is that WEC uses alphanumeric numbers, which are strings. So they will claim that these are alphanumeric numbers, that these are strings. We certainly wouldn't disagree with that. Let's look at this one. Is this an alphanumeric number? Well, it's not. It's a date. A date number is different than alphanumeric, and if you want to get into the individual characters, these characters in between are neither alpha nor numeric. Another key issue here is notice that WEC has a 5 series, so 5787, 5787, and then remember we're sorting these. You can't see the far left column, but these are all in direct sorts. We jump to the first 7 million series, and so we go from the 5 series to a 7 series with literally perhaps 20 million, 50 million numbers in between here that are unused by WEC. Very, very, very troublesome and impossible for anybody to really to audit. Now let's look at example number 6. So in example number 6, remember we are talking right now about the concepts of alphanumeric. We can see that in this particular one, we are now moving toward the end of the data set. So this is at the tail end of the data set. We can see we have the number 90, and then the next number is 90 million. Now, why not? And then the next number is 92 and 93. And the next number is A. And here is a footnote type number. Who knows what this is? Perhaps somebody's license plate, but it's put in there. What is troublesome about this? The first thing that's troublesome is if we're creating our voter ID numbers with machine-generated numbers, they should always be with machine-generated numbers. As soon as you allow people to go in and to make changes to voter IDs, whether they're active or inactive voters, doesn't matter, and to start putting in dates, etc., you have no idea what else they were doing. Another example, this that you see in the circle is not a piece of junk on my screen. This is an apostrophe. This particular individual, Aaron, has as a voter ID number an apostrophe. An apostrophe is not an alphanumeric character. There are many examples throughout the data set, hundreds and hundreds of examples of characters that are not neither alpha nor numeric. Now, why is that important? Because WEC says on their website in their FAQ that they have alphanumeric characters, and that is indeed what their system is. So let's just take a few minutes here to examine WEC data from a different perspective. Many people believe the right to vote is fundamental to our way of life. If it is, the voter ID ought to be fundamental to that process. If the voter ID is indeed fundamental, why would one create a voter ID system that neither humans nor computers, by admission of WEC, can make sense of? Remember, this is an admission on their FAQ system in Exhibit 1. Perhaps if we change the context, we can make sense of this. Sarbanes-Oxley has mandated that all public corporation financial statements are auditable, and if they hide problems, their CEO and their CFO can and do go to prison. Let us apply WEC's data integrity standards to a Fortune 500 company. You be the judge. Our public company has financial statements using a numeric system that is neither human nor computer, neither of which can follow. So this public company that is selling stock in the public sector has a numeric system like WEC's that nobody can follow. That same company claims to have one type of numbering system, say alphanumeric, but after inspection, it does not. They're not alphanumeric. That particular company has financial statements that show that unidentified people can insert an apostrophe, a date, or something else into their numbering sequence, and nobody knows who did it or why they did it. That company's financials show that an unnamed person can insert a date into a field that's supposed to be a number, not a date. That company uses codes which nobody but its employees can understand in its financial statements. That company has financial statements that no human can make sense of, traditional computer programs cannot understand, cannot sort, and cannot find order. That Fortune 500 company publishes an FAQ page that states it uses a numbering system that is not a numbering system, not really. Rather, it's a set of codes interpreted only by its members. Members of this committee, if that happened in the public corporate world, the CEO and the CFO would go to jail. Why would we apply a lesser standard to voter integrity? Another way of examining the WEC system is from the outside in. What would we do if we wanted to deliberately thwart citizen visibility to their voting system? Let's create a voting system where nobody can see what we're doing. The first thing we would do is we would charge citizens $12,000 or more for a copy of their voter roll, because very few, if any, people could afford to do that. The second thing we would do is we'd use a numbering system so convoluted that human auditors and computer systems would have great trouble making sense of it. The third thing we would do is we would make the voter roll unable to be sorted using alphanumerics, using dates, using apostrophes, inserting footnotes by people with no audit trail of who did what and when they did it. And the last thing we would do is we would fail to make the cast ballot information, the information about the ballots that were cast, available so citizens can cross-check cast ballots against voter IDs, because voter IDs tell me you voted. Cast ballots tell me how many times you voted. Members of this committee, WEC has created such a system, and that is my testimony.
Jay, thank you very much. I think we'll take questions from members at this point. Members? Well, Jay, I guess you have us temporarily speechless, but I'm sure they'll just take another minute or two here. Jay, you talked about cast ballot information. It's something can you explain what a cast ballot is? I think you kind of briefly went over that.
When you are looking at voter information, there are typically two sources. There's one source called the voter registration list. The voter registration list has the name, the address, the age, the telephone number, all the votes that you've cast in different elections. You voted in election in 2008, 16, et cetera. It has your email address, perhaps. And it tells me that you voted in the 2020 election, for instance. There's a separate list, which Wisconsin has, called the cast ballot list, and it may be called another name, but basically what the list is this. On election day and the weeks before election, people show up to vote, and particularly mail-in and absentee ballots and same-day registrations, that you show up, you register, you vote right when you're standing there. The state collects that information, and that information is the information of people who actually showed up to vote. It is typically gathered at the voting booth, and it is then transported after the election up to the state. And it says that Bill Jones voted in this particular election. And then that information goes into the voter registration list and checks off that Bill voted. However, the state provides it and makes it available for absentee and mail-in ballots, but it does not make it available for everybody. So it doesn't show me that Bill Jones actually showed up to vote on election day. He had already been registered for a year. And so when we got that information, and we get that information from the state, if there were 3.5 million people who voted, the list we get has 2.5 million people on it, because it's only the list of people who voted absentee and mail and same-day registrants. Why is that important? Because if I had the list of all of the people who voted and I had their ballot ID, so it wouldn't tell me who you voted for, it would just tell me you voted, I would know that Bill Jones voted from the voter registration list, but from the voter cast ballot list, I would know that Bill Jones voted 4 times in 3 different counties, as we are finding in other states. The state does not make that available.
Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess more of a question for you about this. It seems to me that this is, it's coming up in the context of people looking into the 2020 election, but as both of the last 2 speakers have made clear, there's decades worth of this. This is nothing new. And so, it's my understanding it's the result of different databases coming together over the years. And obviously we have local clerks who are all putting in information. We don't have a centralized election system. WEC is administering this at the statewide level, but we have all of these localized inputs. And so I guess it seems like if we think it's important to have data in a particular way or to be able to audit in a particular way, that we ought to divorce that conversation from anything about 2020, because it's clear this is a historical issue, and sort of lower the temperature of some of the accusations around whether folks at WEC ought to be in prison like a Fortune 500 company or whatever, and just talk to WEC about like what it would take in terms of resources for them to present data in a way we want it. So I'm wondering, did you invite anybody from WEC in to respond to this, or is it your intention to sort of try to have that conversation maybe separate from discussions about what happened in 2020? Because this really seems to be more of a history beyond that and forward-looking kind of issue.
Sure. The last time I asked WEC about data, I was told it would cost $100,000 and shut down the system for about a month. So I guess having someone who's purchased the information, which I don't have $12,500 to look at, go through the information at his level of expertise and allow us to point out some of the obvious concerns. I don't know that this is necessarily 2020 as it is about elections integrity overall. I think what you're hearing from is that the WEC voter list has serious compromised issues to it. And I have been asking, just not necessarily the response I think we were all hoping for.
So, I mean, if we have a price tag of what WEC says it would take to do something here, and I think we continue to have a significant unspent surplus, I mean, maybe we can have a productive conversation about how to empower WEC to make improvements. It just seems like maybe we should be talking to them if that's the direction we want to go.
Yeah, well, again, some of us in this room, I think that at the end of the day, Democrats, Republicans, we want a system that's auditable, we want a system that's transparent, and we want a system that we know we can compare voter information. I mean, at the end of the day, I would hope that that's what we're looking at. But as you've heard from Mr. Valentine, who's an expert in data and has spent the money and gone through this list, I think we have the voters of Wisconsin who have spent millions of dollars on the WEC team and millions of dollars on managing this. We do spend, I think, $10 million a month, 850 employees of IT expertise for the state of Wisconsin that is managing some of this. I think what you have from Mr. Valentine here is that it needs additional oversight.
Well, then I guess I hope we would invite the experts at WEC to come in and have a conversation, because I feel like a lot of the issues that have been raised in this presentation, I mean, as Mr. Valentine said, WEC stated right on their FAQ that these were not so much numbers as actually code. So, I don't know that there's a lot new in this presentation that WEC hasn't freely acknowledged, but if we want something done differently, it seems like we should talk to some of those experts at WEC about how to do it.
Sure, and like I say, I've been trying to, but it came in a very expensive cost of $100,000 to do exactly that. So we will certainly continue that. There's no doubt about it. Representative?
Thank you. I actually, continuing a little bit down that chain just for one moment.
Sure.
This committee seems to have informational hearing after informational hearing, and it feels more like one-sided message hearing after one-sided message hearing. And I'm wondering, I mean, $100,000 is a lot of money, but if this is what you believe is needed for election security, not sure I agree with you, but if that's what you believe, why not just write a bill, have a hearing on the bill where you could have experts come, but you could also have the folks who actually administer the system come and talk about it. I mean, I think this is a really unproductive process to just have informational hearing with a few invited speakers and never get at the nitty gritty of both sides of an issue or any proposals. So I guess I'm trying to understand the rationale for doing this as opposed to why you're not just bringing a bill before us.
Sure, so this is data. This spends $12,500 to get this. This is what the day that was pulled, this information was. This is, that voter number was an apostrophe. As we are trying to make sure we don't have double voters across the state, we don't have duplicate voters, how can we possibly have a system that we have confidence when the letter A is your voter number compared to a 9-digit sequence? That's a problem. And I don't know that I need a bill, but I will have the opportunity to have a conversation, as I've been trying to, I think many of us, that WEC has not necessarily fulfilled its obligation for the Help America Vote Act by making a voter number an apostrophe, an A, not sequencing, using different numbers, and a whole host of other issues. And I don't know that this requires a bill as much as the oversight of our WEC and those who manage it to make sure that they're doing their job.
Sounds to me like you're saying they need a new database system. And if that's the case, you're a legislator, you're empowered to offer that as a solution and to have an honest discussion about it. Honestly, we're not having a discussion here. I can't turn and ask the folks at the Elections Commission here at this hearing to address these concerns because they're not invited to speak. If they wanted to come, they couldn't just show up and speak. This was invited guests only.
Okay, well, like I said, we have been trying to have conversations and get information, but I'm being charged so much money. And I want to thank Jay for coming in and providing this because I don't personally have $12,500. So it makes access to our supposedly transparent system pretty hard to get.
Did you ask the folks from the Elections Commission to come and testify at this hearing and present this information?
Well, I think that we will certainly make this material available to, but this is the data that was charged to this group for voter numbers, and like he says, he has several.
That didn't answer the question. I understand this is the data he received.
Sure.
As the Elections Committee, have you asked the Elections Commission to come in and present this data to us and to talk about it and to address these sorts of concerns? I mean, you're raising what may or may not be real concerns, right? Like, I'm gonna be honest and say, this numbering system clearly isn't the numbering system I would choose if I was putting something together from scratch. I think this has been a conglomeration of iterations of databases over years, and for whatever reason, these numbers are not sequential and they're not, they're not actually numbers, they're codes. What I don't see is a whole bunch of voters with the same number, right? Like, that's not there. So if we can say this may not meet a standard that this particular person would like, it may not meet a standard that I would like. I'm not going to answer that without having heard from WISC, right? Without having heard from the people who actually work with the system. But we can't do that if you don't invite them to be here at the hearing and be part of this discussion. I think it is really frustrating that we have a whole bunch of so-called experts and we don't have the people who actually work with the system, and you're not providing the opportunity for us and the public to hear from them by doing these invited testimony only hearings.
Thank you. I appreciate your suggestion. I'm sorry, Representative?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question of
Sure.
Mr. Valentine.
If you want to make sure you talk to the microphone first.
That's
before
right.
you
I was just about to turn around and talk to the screen.
Is he
Mr.
still there?
Valentine,
'Cause
if
he
you can hear
disappeared
me?
from the screen.
He's not up there anymore.
Do we lose him? Oh, no.
I did not hear the question.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, sorry.
Is there any correlation between the voter registration numbers and the date that these particular voters registered? So in other words, were they using 6 digits for one period of time and letters on another period of time? Were you able to make any correlation like that?
There are patterns there, and they're not consistent enough that we could do much with it.
Follow-up question. You indicated practices that private companies would use that are kind of industry standard. The term that came to my mind at that time was generally accepted accounting practices. That is just kind of this accepted body of way of doing things for companies when they file their paperwork. And your indication is that WEC is not using something that would definitely not be part of generally accepted accounting practices. So the reason that these companies do this, and I think you define this as well, is because it's for transparency purposes, basically. So if a company is going to be audited, they need to be able to know that when they look at one company's papers, it's going to be similar to another company's papers. And I don't know if you've looked at other states' data. And if you have you seen anything like this in any other states?
The answer is, I am right now running probably 20 states on the way to running 40 states. And I have the data from 20 or 25 that I'm actively working with now. And in no other state have I seen this particular issue on voting number sequences as egregious or even close to Wisconsin. The way I would describe it is each state has different sets of issues, and those issues tend to be different. So in one state, you have all kinds of issues with duplicate ballot numbers. In another state, you have what we've just discussed in Wisconsin. Many of the states have troublesome information, but none of the ones I have seen has them in their voter ID number the way we describe it today.
Would you be able to point to a particular state that you say does this well? that perhaps is something Wisconsin should emulate?
I could, I would have to look at the states and do that. I'm just not prepared to do it, but it isn't complicated. Okay, there's a very simple way to solve this problem. There's a very simple way to data-wise to solve this problem, and it would not cost you $100,000. It wouldn't cost you a fraction. It cost you a fraction of that. You could solve this problem in a week, and there's a very easy way to do it with data. And WEC could choose to do that, and if they chose to do it, their voter rolls would be totally transparent going forward.
Yeah, I think we're all interested. You've all got us interested at that point.
Paused at a really.
Here, okay, well, this isn't complicated. Let me show you, okay? So I'm bringing up, you can still see my screen, right?
No.
No, we cannot.
Oh, you can't? Okay, wait a
All right,
second.
Matt, hold on, show us your.
No, it's not your fault, it's my fault. Don't touch the controls here. Yeah, there's a very easy way to do this, and it's when I say easy, it's simple and it's easily done, and it should be done. So you will notice, you can see my screen now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we're just going to take these examples. We have Macy and Carmen and Mark and Kathleen, and we see that each one of these people has a number or a symbol given to them by WEC, and we just beat them up for it. Here's what we do. We create a second column right here. A second column. There's a column between this and this. We sort according to this kind of a sort number from a traditional computer. We start at number 1, we go to number 7 million, and this person gets 8 zeros and a 1, 8 zeros and a 2. And you just create a second column. So you don't throw away what you had before, because for forensic reasons, you want that. But you can simply create a resequencing of these numbers with, appropriate numbers, and you can do it by their date of registration, et cetera. It's very simply done. A computer do it in an hour. And you keep those 2 columns. Then what happens is every single time, and you sort by 1, so you increment only by 1, so you can't insert voters like I showed you we were doing before. There's no inserting stuff in here like I showed you. Because if you insert, there's no place when you're in sequencing by 1. And when voter number 7,047,000 comes on, their number will be the next biggest number in this. It's simple, it's easy to do, it doesn't get rid of any of the past history, it can be done by a computer in a day. And going forward, it gives you 100% auditability.
So was that like the $2 million answer? That was kind of a very, you're right, it is so simple that it's just another column. Thank you, Jay, that's huge, thank you.
Of course, that's the way you should do it. And then what you can still go back and look at stuff that happened in the past. If you're checking some election for mayor in some county from last year and you want to use the old numbers, that they may be of value to you. But going forward, all new voters get a voter ID number that's incremented by 1. And then what happens is all of the things I showed you that numbers are supposed to do, they work in an order, they're sortable, they're easily auditable. All of that is there. And all of this craziness about, do we have voter fraud? Do we have this and that with all these voter IDs becomes black and white. You do or you don't. You can see the numbers. And it's a very simple solution, and it's very inexpensive. You do it in a day or 2.
Representative Peacefield, I think, has another question for you.
Yeah, following up on that, that seems to be a very practical solution. The impractical part I would think would be is after you have 10 or 20 years of elections, you're going to have quite a number of columns there. Would you have a solution to that problem as well?
No, because you have 1 column, that column's got 10 digits or 12 digits, unless the state of Wisconsin is going to get more than, 50 million people, you don't have to worry about that.
So I guess I didn't quite understand that. So if there is I would think that you would have to form a new column every time there's an election held, because there would be new registries that would come in that would have to be added on.
No,
Of course,
you have
they're,
one
well,
column
you're
here.
right, because they're
This
being added on
column
at
is
the end.
voter ID.
Okay.
And so today, we know, we'll take an example. There are 3.5 million voters in your state today. Let's just use that as a agreed number. So today, we have 3.5 million rows. The row 1 is 00001, and then row 2 is 2, 3, 4. And they're there. Now they can vote in any election they want. Every time they vote, that's their voter ID number. Everybody knows who they are. When they die, that voter ID number stays there. It's an inactive one, shows that they're dead, but the sequence stays the same. And when we add next year, we had 20,000 college kids show up in Wisconsin and they want to register and they're new voters, we add them at the bottom. And their voter's ID number will correspond to the date that they registered. It's very simple. It's how would you do a column in Excel? It's the same thing. You just add them at the end.
Thank you for that explanation.
Representative.
I was not a math guy.
Representative,
I
yes.
was all more of a math geek than I care to admit, but I guess that's what happens when you grow up the daughter of an actuary.
No wonder you're so excited.
There you go. Yeah, indeed. Love statistics more than I should. And I wish WEC was here to answer this question, but I'm going to go ahead and ask the individual who's testifying. What are these numbers used for in the practical sense? I mean, beyond the database. When I go to vote, they don't ask me my voter registration number. They don't tell me my registration number. I don't know if they see my registration number. How is this number used? I guess I'm trying to figure out the relevance of this from a standpoint of how this number is used within our elections.
Well, what happens in most states, happens in your state for certain, happens in most states. You show up to vote and the gentleman and the lady are there and they have your list of names, your name's upside down, and they show you your driver's license or whatever your ID you select, and they put you in. At that point, when they type you into the system or bring you into the system, you are going in according to a voter ID number. Now, you don't have to know what that number is. It's not important. It's important that the computer knows, because the next day when somebody shows up and gives your name and your address and says, I want to vote, the system goes, no, that person already voted. So that's kind of how it happens in most states. I think, pretty sure that's how it happens in Wisconsin. I would defer.
I'm going to stop you there for a moment just to correct you. I've been both a poll worker and a voter here in Wisconsin at various points in time. And never once at the polling place has anything been entered into a system. In our more decentralized systems, at least the vast majority of our polling places, I'm not sure, I think a few of them may have electronic poll books now, but largely this is actually happening on paper. There's a printout, they match your name and your ID and your address. Again, not matching anything with a voter number, you're matching the name and address on that person's ID card to what's listed on the poll book, and then they sign by that spot on the poll book. So again, I guess, maybe your expertise just isn't Wisconsin enough. But I'm trying to figure out how this is used in Wisconsin to better understand really why this matters.
Well, Jay, do you want to go ahead or do you want me to?
Yeah, however, it doesn't really matter. However it's done in Wisconsin, we know for a fact that there are certain steps that occur. We know that you go in and you show somebody identification. We know that they hand you a ballot. We know that you vote, or you do the same thing absentee. We know with 100% certainty at some point in that process, whether it's there, whether it's when they upload stuff to the state, whether it's when they upload stuff to the county, I don't know how you do it. At some point, it 100% of the time must tie to your voter ID. And we see in the records for WEC that there are times it does not match a voter ID. And when it doesn't, WEC will kick it out. There are examples of that. So I defer on this to Dan Eastman, who is in the room, and I think he's testifying next. Dan is he's a Wisconsin guy. He knows how all this stuff works. I'm a data guy. I am right now going into supposition. Dan's somebody who has knowledge of this area that I do not.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, again, I would reiterate that the folks from WEC could probably answer exactly how this number is used, but they were not invited to come testify today.
Well, your name and your voter number are one of the things that's put into the ERIC database to determine if you have voted more than one time. I mean, you're right, that is not necessarily available in the poll book, but it is your identifier. You can have Tom Jones, how many times, junior, senior, in a house. That is one of the things that identifies you from voting across state lines. So your voter ID is one of the pieces of the identifiers of the information that, you're right, your name, your address, your birthday, that is one of the other things that is necessary in making sure that we know who you are. And it would not necessarily, it's not in your poll book or your Badger book, or it's not in that, but it is one of the things that helps identify you as a voter.
So it's a back-end process. It's not something that's actually used on election day to identify you or to secure the election in any way. And again, like, if WEC were here, they could tell us more about the back-end piece and the process there, but it's unfortunate that that's not who's testifying today.
Yes, Representative, sorry.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify on the $12,000 piece. I hope that Mr. Valentine got more than these 3 pages for his $12,000, but
Yes.
regardless.
7 million records plus.
Regardless, now that those exist and are out there and we have this in front of us, I don't think WEC was charging a $12,000 speaker's fee, so I still don't understand why they're not here today, and if they're not, I hope they will be here soon, or at least that we will extend the invitation, because again, I think we're sort of, we as legislators are trying to learn and come up with solutions. We've got Mr. Valentine making some claims, but we don't have that third piece of the triangle to help us all better understand how this works in Wisconsin and what those solutions might be. And if we want this to be a productive use of everyone's time, I think we need to do that.
I appreciate your input. All right, with that, any other questions for Mr. Valentine?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Representative Murphy.
thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Mr. Valentine, based on the voter registration numbers on here and the way they do it, now I've worked with Excel spreadsheets, it would seem to me that this would be unsearchable to be able to search this database for anything in particular. Is that true?
It's searchable, but it is not, it doesn't meet the other requirements. So if we put in the name Bill Jones at this address, can we find him? We can. But if we want to do the kind of analysis that we would typically do, which is I want to sort the voter ID number and then tie them to perhaps registration dates and things like that, things begin to not make sense, as I showed in the presentation. It's in the voter ID number area where it becomes very troublesome.
Sure, okay, yeah, that's sufficing.
I appreciate that. Any final questions? With that, thank you, Mr. Valentine. We appreciate you so much for Zooming in today.
Okay, thank you, bye.
With that, we'll have our last speaker come in, and that would be Dan Eastman.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to appear before you. And I come as an attorney, native son of Wisconsin. I represent a number of clients in election integrity matters. And some of my clients have hired Jay Valentine and also Jeff O'Donnell as experts to analyze the WEC database. As a Wisconsinite and as Wisconsinites, all of us who vote, who are eligible to vote, are in that database. Our names, our addresses, maybe our phone numbers and emails, certainly our private information, our driver's license, social security number. This is a very interesting database. A while back, let me give you a little background. I'm an attorney by training. I practice out of Mequon, Wisconsin. I spent 7 years in state government as an appointee in the Thompson administration, I served in 3 separate agencies. I was the agency head of the State Securities Commissioner's Office when it was an independent agency. I also served as executive director at the Department of Development, which was responsible for the agency's budget. And also I served on the Public Service Commission as one of the 3 commissioners. So I have experience as an executive appointee in government. I also served for 3 years, people have seen as the county finance director under Jim Ladwick. Our job was, of course, to implement Act 10 and also to deal with the day-to-day operations of government, including 3 annual budget audits done by outside accounting firms. So I feel I have some significant understanding of how state agencies work. And I think on a personal note, I'm a little discouraged to see the lack of cooperation between the executive and the legislative. This legislative body is like all in the country, and of course our Congress, and that they have legislative oversight of the executive. That's a separation of powers issue, and it's good public policy because we, the people, the assembly, the 99 of you, that's the closest to the people, you have a chance to see what the executive is doing and keep the executive honest. It's quite troubling to see an executive agency suing to stop investigations and oversight. I think that's a terrible policy, and I think it's something that should be stopped. This body needs to examine all of the legislative actions of all of the agencies, because that's how our representative democracy works. The issue that I want to address today, it builds on Jay's testimony and also O'Donnell's testimony. And we were given a list of 5 examples by a group in Wisconsin. I had expected the group to be here today. Apparently there's a serious illness and the group is not here, but we were given this information. And I'd like to go on record as saying that I don't know any of these people. I have no idea how they voted. I believe them all to be good citizens. I'm not accusing anyone of anything, but we want to point out issues with the WEC database that strongly suggest that this database must be investigated annually by an outside bipartisan group so that the people of Wisconsin understand what's going on with our data. And I want to point out a few things that we saw that we're going to try to dig into deeper. As Jay had mentioned, this database of 7 million people, there are holes in it. And within those holes, it appears that there are anomalies. And if you go to the first name on this, and I don't know this person, I have no idea what this is all about, other than what WEC's database shows is the first person, and I'm just going to use the name Bonnie, has 2 separate voter ID registration numbers. And if you scroll over to the other side, both of those people voted. And if you look at the last name, which I will not mention, there's a letter missing, and that apparently creates a second alter ego with a separate voter ID number, but it shows that both of those people voted. And if you go down this list, you'll see the same phenomenon that we're finding more through Jay's analysis. We're finding in the order of 153,000 examples of people who are in this database, the 7 million person database, that appear to have been inserted somehow, some way by somebody, and they're in there and they're casting ballots. And I think that's something that this committee has to really take a look at with respect to the database, because the way this works is that on election day, there are 2 ways to vote in Wisconsin. Number 1, you can show up at the poll the way you're supposed to and put your ballot through. And of course, you show the ID, and at least in Ozaukee County, we sign the paper book, and that's how you vote. The other way is absentee. You can go to your city hall, the clerk, and you can vote early, 2 weeks ahead of time. They put your ballot in an envelope. It's absentee, but you voted in person. Or you can mail it in, or at least in prior elections, there was a drop box option. Or I suppose you could bring the ballot back and hand it to the clerk, but all of those ballots are absentee and they're in an envelope. So you can either walk in and vote, or there's a vote ballot in an envelope. And when those envelopes come to the city clerks, and I feel so badly for our clerks, we've got 1,852 clerks in the state, city clerks, municipal clerks, and we have 72 county clerks, but it's a torrent. In the last 2 election cycles, we've gone from everybody showing up to vote to everybody mailing in a ballot. Well, the clerks are sitting there with thousands and thousands and thousands of ballots, and they all come in 2 weeks. What do? Well, you take out your FIDO key and you put it next to the machine, you turn it on, you log in. City of Mequon has 3 clerks, and if we have a list, I think I saw a list from this committee that showed there were over 3,200 people that can log into the system and enter these in. But what happens is the envelopes come in, you look at the name and the address, the signature, the witness signature, and you press received. And at that point in this system, the ballot is cast. Then it goes into a tub and it's transported off to the polling place where it's opened up and tabulated on election day or sent to central count. So if you wanted to cheat, the way you want to do it is you got to get a whole bunch of absentee ballots from the right district with people's names on it who are on the voter roll in WISC. And you got to fill them out and you got to get them to your clerk. And the clerk has to believe it's a real voter and push enter and then into the tub. And when they're doing thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands a day, can you fool the clerk? So we're looking at that because in other states, there's a lot of information, but we believe, given the data we've seen and Jay's analysis and O'Donnell's his analysis, that within this WEC database, there are all sorts of, we'll call them phantom voters, ghost voters, mystery voters, whatever terminology. But if that's true, we need to know that, because whoever has that master list and votes them and slips that past the clerk, and the clerk doesn't know, that's how you can change the outcome of elections. You say, well, all right, so you got, no content, you got one person that's questionable. Okay, so what? It's not going to change anything. But if you take a look at this statewide and you start thinking about this statewide, that's a lot of votes. And I think that's why this committee needs to audit the WEC. You've got to know this database. Now, we had heard from the WEC people that this database was unique to Wisconsin and it was home coded and, it's, the stuff that nobody else in the country has one. We heard the same sales pitch out of Michigan. Okay, well, it's odd. And then Ohio. Well, you start looking at it and then you start to say, well, who did this coding? What language is this coded in? Where does this thing live? Well, WEC tells us, well, it lives at the Department of Administration, the DET. Well, we get an email back from the DET that says, we don't have anything to do with this. So who do I believe? Do you believe WEC says it's at DOA? Or DOA's email that says we don't have anything to do with it? We think the data, the names and addresses and phone numbers are living at DOA on the DET server. But who's running the application? Who coded it? Who has access to it? We don't know. So we look at this public email coming out of Milwaukee between Mr. Rubenstein, and also Clarwood O'Bog. They're talking about the Holy Grail being an API. Well, an API is a little code piece that allows you to go into a database. Like when you log into your bank account or your credit card account, you can go in, you see it, that's the API. Well, we asked WEC, hey, can we get an API? Let's try that. And say, well, no, it's not available to the public. You can't have an API. You get into the WEC system. But other people seem to have done it. And that raises the partisan issue of fairness in Wisconsin. Is this a fair system, or is this a system that's being used as a tool by one party and maybe the other party is the tools? I don't know, but they don't have access. Okay, how does this happen? And then the question is, this is our only place to vote, is the assembly. The We the People group here, you got to look at this. And you have to be able to demonstrate to the people of Wisconsin that this system is a fair, transparent, objective platform that's working for everybody. It's like a wrench in a car, it works on a Chevy and a Toyota. This tool has to be equal for everybody. If somebody has access to this, and we don't know, all we see is what's in the newspapers, we need to know if this system is fair. Is it fair? And I think your committee is the only committee that can ask that question. And you have to. That's just, if you should hire some national experts, bipartisan committee, and go in there and do a top to bottom review. And if it's a simple fix like Jay says, add a column and add a number, that's great. But we need to know what's going on. Because let me tell you why. My clients have spent $46,000 on this data that we're running. And it's not the November 2020, it's anything that's happened since up to all elections up to August 19th of 2021. It's a lot of elections back. We can see last governor's election. You can go back and see this stuff. And it's $46,000 because we have two snapshots of the voter roll, which is everybody's name, 7 million people. And then we've got the ballots cast, absentee ballots cast database, which was $10,500 times two. So we have $46,000 invested in this. You know, in the average Wisconsin, I think the number is like $34,000 annual income per Wisconsinite, you know, the median income. So unless you're a deep pockets kind of person, you're not going to see this. You're not going to see what's on this sheet. And that's why it was so disturbing. Now, there's another group, as I had mentioned, that has 154,000 of these things. But let's ask the question, did that person, can you change one person's last name by one letter and cast a ballot? Can you do it at the polls? Can you do it absentee? We need to know that, because none of this is going to calm down until a government steps in and says, all right, let's have a complete and fair open audit, check the system, figure out what's going on, make it transparent, and then go forward. Or people will, every single election, it's going to be the same thing. Whoever loses, and me in here for a year, pound the table. How about we don't do that? We just, good public policy. If we have to do audits on an annual basis for every county, any governmental body that issues debt, we should be doing the same thing. And secondly, and this is my opinion only, I don't believe, having served in state government for 10 years, that a policy state agency that deals with administrative policy should have the data. We have a great Department of Administration with a great DET, and they run the state driver's license. They run all the data for the state. They have PhDs. They're smart people over there. Why not segregate the tool from the administration and make life a lot easier instead of having it all under one umbrella, which is unfortunately not a cooperative agency at the moment? I would strongly suggest getting experts in to look at this thing, answer these questions, get it isolated, safe, and then let's move forward. And that's why I really wanted to testify, because when we see these types of things where you've got people like married, somebody gets married and they change their name or hyphenate their name, and all we're seeing is that they vote multiple times in the election. And this is WISC data. We're not making it up. We didn't add anything. All we're doing is looking at WISC data. So it leaves you with the question, if this is correct, people are multi-voting all over the state. If this is not correct, then my client would like its $46,000 back because we bought defective data. So what is it? Is it garbage or is it the truth? We don't know. But I think at some point we've got to get serious about this and start to make some decisions as to how we're going to run the elections in this state. So that's all I have. Thank you.
So, so you're saying some of this information that we have on here, you have a different voter number and you have them voting twice in elections, correct?
Right.
That's the list that we have on here. There are people that some voted at the polls, some they're saying they voted absentee, they voted, you have some concerns here that you're seeing some people voting multiple times, many of them at the polls, it looks like, with the same name and a different voter registration, right?
And you can't do that. You can't walk into a polling place and, Dan Eastman and Daniel Eastman with two N's. The clerk, the poll worker, I'm a poll worker, the representative's a poll worker. You're going to say, wait a minute, what's going on here? So how does this is WISC data? And it's expensive. In Nevada, it's $30. In Wisconsin, each snapshot.
That would make my life a lot easier. Instead of $100,000, I think $30 would be a better cost. I'm not going to kid you. Do you have questions for Mr. Eastman? Yes, Representative.
Thank you. I guess I'm just trying to get at the bottom of what you're here to say, because I'm sort of hearing you say two different things. One, that we should have more processes that give the public confidence in our elections, that we either the Democrat or the Republican is going to win by a narrow margin, and we want voters to have confidence in that. And I agree with that. But I'm also hearing you basically suggest that there is a conspiracy where Democrats are stealing the election from Republicans on a statewide basis, using the method you just mentioned to get fake votes past clerks. Are you alleging that? Or,
No, I didn't say that at all. I didn't
I didn't
mention
use that, yeah.
Democrats or Republicans. What I'm telling you is, if you can't transparently see who's in the voter database, you got 7 million names. We've got 5.8 million Wisconsinites, okay? You've got 4.8 million that are old enough to vote, and 3.3 million people voted. You got 7 million names, and only 3.3 million people voted. So how do you figure out what's going on when you get WEC data for $46,000? I don't care if it's Republicans or Democrats. Anybody can do this. If you've got a master list of people you buried in here, you're good. You can vote them. You prove that I can, we're trying to prove that's the case. You show me it isn't. Because this is what all of this data is suggesting, that we've got a mess here. And wouldn't it be better if everybody just start over, everybody register at the polls, and you start over again and not have this emerge over 12 years? It's not a conspiracy. It's not, don't think about Orange Man bad, okay? Let's think about what's happening this year, okay? Because we're living in the future. Let's stop talking partisan and start talking about fixing an election system that puts 6 million people's democratic rights at risk. And this is a very high and expensive state to live in to begin with. The taxes are high, the regulations are high. So we need to fix this. It's not about partisan politics. It's about doing your job and fixing this.
okay, so you're not alleging anything untoward about the 2020 election or any past election. You're just saying.
I'm just saying the database is a mess and we need to get this fixed.
So then it seems like we're back to the conversation from the last speakers of let's get WEC in here and figure out what it would,
I think it'd be
what
great.
funding we'd have to give them to get the.
They won't give us the time of day, so that's why we're here.
Well,
You know.
the data is the data. I mean, at the end of the day, and so, I mean, as you have the first two names on here, one voting at the polls, same name, different voter number, voter ID number, same name, same address, same one voting, 2 different dates, one in October and the other in November on election day, supposedly both at the polls. These are the type of things that I think that you're finding within the system that have some of the questions. Yes, Representative.
Thank you. So it appears that you're alleging that there are folks based on this that voted twice. Have you shared this with law enforcement?
No, I'm not alleging anything. I'm just pointing out that we've been given data from the WEC database that's showing this. We don't know what to make of it. We're not accusing anybody of anything. We don't know what to make of it. For $46,000, we kind of like to not be looking at like Miss Andrew here and Miss Andrews with separate voter identification numbers. On the bottom line, all active registered voters voting at a polling place. Now, you know as well as I do, you can't walk into a polling place and Andrews is going to be right below each other. Mm-hmm. So how do you sort that out? Did that happen? Or is this defective data? Well, in that particular instance, you go to the polling book, there's just one person who voted, and I respect that, her right to vote. That's great. We encourage that. But why are we seeing WEC data that's this bad?
Right, I think we need to be careful difference. Yeah, we're not saying any of these people.
Not at all. I hope they all voted.
But it makes it when you pull it.
Only once, yeah.
Again, we're in this weirdly one-sided conversation of presenting what appear to be accusations, they may not be intended that way, without anybody here to actually answer the questions who knows the system. I'm kind of flashing back on, over 10 years ago when we were debating building the system and Accenture and other contracts and all of that. But all of that said, right, like ultimately, right now we have a voter database system. If our testifiers are raising these concerns, it seems that the logical thing to do would, again, bring in somebody from WEC to actually come answer questions who can answer them, and I'd appreciate that.
I think the first thing is to bring up the issues and then to solve them, and then hopefully legislation can pursue that. I agree with that. But I think we're having some experts come in, and I'm grateful for their time today to be able to show the information that they purchased, because I don't have the money to be able to do this.
Sure, but if you brought WEC in, I mean, you're not going to tell me that we as legislators, I don't know what you did through an open record request or whatever, but if you're gonna tell me we can't get WEC in here to answer questions about their database, I mean, this is downright silly, right? Like, I mean, that's the way I'm seeing this. And I appreciate these folks taking their time to come testify. I appreciate that they've done this analysis, although I don't know what the analysis is. There's no
Do
conclusion.
you have a question? Okay, so your question is.
I guess what conclusions can you draw from this data when you're telling me this isn't an accusation, we're not saying these people voted twice? If you are indeed an expert witness here, as has been purported, what conclusions should we draw from this? What's your conclusion?
You should, when you see voter numbers in a system where a national expert with deep experience in law enforcement data analysis is telling you the system's goofed up. And when you see from your own database that the system is goofed up because you got all these anomalies, what you do is you get an auditing firm or an investigator in and you take an independent look and keep the WEC system honest. Just like you do with the data in the state driver's license database or all the reg and licensing data. You bring in an expert and you look, and I mean a real expert. I want to see somebody with credentials in data analysis who works for big insurance companies or something. And you bring them in as an independent look, they do a report, and then you either know that you got a train wreck or then everything's fine. But that's what you do. That's what my expert opinion would recommend, because we can't have these allegations, these constant allegations of, ballot trafficking and all stuff in the ballot boxes and all. This has been very damaging to Wisconsin's culture over the last year. And you know what? This is the only group that can stop it. And the way to stop it is you go get yourself some real live experts and you get into that database and you find out. But, WEC is sued to stop investigations. That can't happen. This is a constitutional oversight function of this assembly committee. And you get in there and you take a look, because that's the only way you're going to get this. Because, the next election's coming. The spring election is a big argument. It's going to be the fall election, very controversial. Incumbent governor running for re-election. That's going to be a hoot. The people of Wisconsin have to know that this system is audited. And that's your responsibility as an elected official. That's why we send you to this august body. You need to do that.
And there actually was just an audit of the system, but
No. That LAD audit was not looking at the database. They were running around looking at the voter tabulation equipment. And, we've looked high and low at that. And when the ballots go in and they're tabulated, it all adds up. This is the problem right here. So who gets to put a ballot in the system? And if those allegations stand, we need to know about it, because I'll tell you, that's a bipartisan opportunity. There's not one party is, clever enough against the other. You don't want people putting ballots past those clerks. Talk to your clerk friends. They'll tell you, man, we got all these ballots we got to go through. If it's in the WISC vote system, it's going in. I'm not going to do an investigation of every ballot. So if that lady with the L missing, if that ballot comes in, you got 3 clerks entering, you'll never catch it. So we need to stop that. And that's just good government. That's just good government. It's not partisan. It's just good government.
Representative Murphy, you've been very patient.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So, Mr. Eastman, you bring in a sheet like this. I mean, how many more could you have brought in? I mean, how rampant is this? I mean, if there's 7 million records and this is the only page, then that's not very much. But if there's thousands of.
Well, I was given this by a group who alleges, and it's just an allegation, they have 153,000. Well, that's a big number.
Yeah.
It's not us. They send us, hey, what do you guys think about this? And I think, well, this is odd. So I would recommend having that person come and talk to your committee.
Yeah.
And look at that, because if it's true, that needs to be known. If it's not true, that needs to be known as well. But even if it's not true, then we still have these anomalies, and we still have Jay's anomalies. This system needs to be fixed, because we spend a lot of money in this state on taxes. How about if we ought to be at least, this should be a Cadillac, maybe not a Yugo, get something nice for all that money.
Taxpayers that want their money's worth.
Well, it's expensive, This is, like I said, $34,000 a year is the annual median income of your average Wisconsinite. We're not a wealthy state. We're a blessed state, but we're not, this isn't California, but when you're spending this kind of dough, and frankly, this was never put out to RFP. I mean, anything over $25,000, you need an RFP in state government. and they piggybacked, according to this response, off of existing vendors. Maybe something as sensitive as the state voter roll, where you got, birthdays and driver's license, all this stuff. Maybe that should be an RFP, and the people should see who's going to be the vendor. Because Megan says there's no vendors, and then she gives you a list, of vendors. There's vendors, and we should really know who's doing this.
I think on this page really brings up a lot of questions when you see people
Well,
voting multiple
Well, keep in mind, we're not besmirching anybody
Yeah, no,
here,
no,
but we're just giving this data, and
trying
we'd
not
like
to
some
go there
answers.
too, but I mean, it sure brings up a lot of questions, and I think the questions that, number one is you can see that the voter registration ID is different here also. I mean, different types of numbers going through here. Some are longer numbers, some are shorter numbers. And of course, if there's a lot more of these, the one complaint that I have is that, my colleagues across the table here, they look at this and then they say, well, there's no evidence of, and if we don't investigate, so we can't investigate, we have to have evidence, and I'm trying to figure out how you have that if nobody's willing to allow you to look into it further. And I really think, in some of the discussions that we've had, why isn't WEC here? And I would say, why isn't WEC here? And I think it has not been easy to get WEC to come to these meetings. I'm just going to be real frank about it. I mean, go ask WEC to come to this meeting and see if they'll come. I got a feeling they're going to tell you no.
Aren't they suing us?
Yeah.
They're suing some of us.
So, yeah.
Madam Chair, were they invited? I mean, you're supposing they want to come, but I see a agenda that says invited speakers only. Were they invited is the question.
No, they were not invited at this point.
Well, the question shouldn't
There
be
you go.
about whether they're invited for this meeting. They've been asked to meetings before and haven't come. And so, if you ask somebody several times to come to different informational meetings and they don't come, and then you don't ask them once, I don't think that's the criteria under which this should be
I
done.
came when they were asked, so don't.
No.
Representative, we will still maintain a level of decorum, and I appreciate that from everybody at this table. I can guarantee you that we will have a further conversation with WEC's response to many of these informations. Are there any further questions?
Yes, and just to set the record straight, Megan Wolf has been before this committee this session.
She has.
She has. Maybe you weren't here.
I can just barely remember what she looks like. But yeah.
Maybe you missed the meeting.
You may not have been there.
It's been a while.
But I do have a question for you. I guess I'm still trying to reconcile this. You keep saying that you're not really making allegations, you just want to fix the system. But unless I'm spelling your name wrong and there's a second Dan Eastman, you filed an election in 2020 wanting to throw out Wisconsin.
Do you have a question?
Yes, my question.
Okay.
Yes, I do. My question is, do you stand by the allegations in that lawsuit or not?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question. What's the question?
2020, it wasn't that long ago. You were part of a
I remember
lawsuit
it, yeah.
associated with the Trump campaign trying to change the outcome of the election here in Wisconsin.
No, that's not true. We represented one of the Republican electors in a lawsuit that I was a party of, that I was co-counsel with a number of attorneys. We were representing a Republican elector who felt his constitutional rights had been infringed, and he was dismissed at the lower court case. It went to the Court of Appeals. It went to the United States Supreme Court.
Yes.
And then the Court of Appeals declared the case moot because President Biden had been sworn in, and it was all dismissed. So, yeah,
But the
that's
goal
what
of
I do.
that-
That's what I do for a living. I'm an attorney, and I
Here.
represent people in court in other places. So, yeah.
Am I correct that the goal of that lawsuit was to change the outcome of the presidential election?
No, it was to
here in
protect the
Wisconsin?
constitutional rights of a presidential elector. That's, if you read the case, that's what we were doing, is protecting the constitutional rights of the elector to take part in the electoral college, and that didn't happen. Another group of electors was.
A Biden elector?
Right, yeah, that's who went, from Wisconsin, yeah.
You were trying to protect the rights of a Biden
So
elector?
Representative, are we gonna?
No, I was
are-
representing a Republican, Feehan from La Crosse, is
what you're talking about.
Right, but he wouldn't have any right
But
to
this doesn't
participate in
really
the
have-
electoral college.
One of the things I can't do is talk about my
Representative, so do you have a
clients.
question about today, or are you gonna go into the personal history of each of the people that come forward?
No, my question is, does this gentleman,
I have multiple clients, okay? And the client that I'm representing today is dealing with, we hired Jay Valentine, we
Yes.
hired Jeff O'Donnell here, and we're dealing with the WEC
Database.
database system and whether or not it's fair. That, I don't mix my case, lawyers have multiple cases. And I'm not here to talk about a case that happened a year ago. I'm here to talk about my client's case, which is this case right here. It's
and
not
I
even a
guess I
case,
was,
it's
and
just
I
a
would guess I was just trying to
Yeah.
clarify if you've changed your mind.
So I've been a
So
lifelong
for
Republican. Actually, my
today,
very first
The agenda has
campaign
to
was
deal
Barry
today with the
Goldwater.
WEC database. If you wish to ask him additional questions about previous cases, he said that is your opportunity. But today's agenda item does refer to the WEC database.
I think if someone comes in here having taken a position on the very election that we are discussing,
Sure.
that position is relevant, and it's fair to ask them whether they continue to hold that position or whether they've changed their position.
I think that on the agenda, it is to talk about the WEC
Then where's
database.
WEC? If we're talking about the WEC database, where's WEC?
We've just gone through all of the database information that we have here. The WEC database costs $12,500 to get access to. We have had people who have had access to, gone through it, and they're now sharing that information. I think that is a fair item to say, WEC database, as we have gone through quite a few files, what a number is, and all of the information that goes through that. Do you have a succinct question so we can finish the, and we are to talk about
No,
the
this,
WEC
this,
database?
this has been a waste of time. I will stop wasting further time. Let's move on.
Oh, okay, Representative.
I will waste another moment of our
Please,
time.
please do.
You,
Fine.
I was not aware you were representing a client today. In just a moment ago, you referenced representing a client today, and I may have missed if you said that previously. Can you identify the client that you're representing today?
Yeah, I did. I started the conversation today by saying I represent clients in Wisconsin on this particular.
Right, I understand that, but then you said the client I'm representing today, which implies that you are here not speaking as simply you, the attorney, but you're speaking,
Well,
at least what you just said made me think you were speaking on behalf of a client. And if that is true, I'd like to know.
Well, I
who
guess
you're
I'm also
speaking
a
on behalf
citizen
of.
of Wisconsin, so, I am.
Of course,
but,
but just when you said, it's because of what you just said that I'm asking the question. It's not maybe a gotcha, like, I legitimately want to know if you are here representing somebody, who are you representing? Because it's pretty, I mean, if this were not an informational hearing with an invited speaker and somebody comes representing their client, they fill out a form that says that, so
Fair enough.
can you clarify? That would be really helpful to me.
Well, sure, I represent Attorney Kurt Olson in the state of Wisconsin.
Okay.
Representative Murphy.
So my question is, and maybe Ledge Council could help me with this. I'm trying to understand where the $12,500 figure for the database comes from. Because I think about in my own situation, I'm open records requested from time to time. Generally, we don't charge anything for that. Occasionally, there might be a small charge, based on the search that we have to do, if we have to print documents or whatever. But it seems to me that this is a database, and it's the same database. I mean, it changes, but it's the same beast over and over and over again. And so you click something and boom, you send it to somebody. I'm trying to understand why that has to cost $12,500. And in the, within the realm of open records in which we do, I mean, if I tried to charge somebody $12,500 for a record, I mean, there would be an upheaval. So
fees are set by statute and by administrative rule.
Okay.
And there's a base fee, and then there's a there's a $5 fee for every 1,000 records requested. It's actually capped at $12,500 if they tied the number to the actual
So
dollar
it'd be
amount
more,
higher.
it'd be more if you did it by the.
Right, but it's capped
numbers.
at $12,500.
All right.
Yes, Representative Roser.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I just have a question for clarification. I recall several meetings ago that it was discussed that there were multiple requests by people for the WIC database during the election. And that I believe you said at that time that there was a charge of $12,500 every time they made that request.
That is correct.
Okay, so I'm recalling that correctly. And have you any idea how, I think you even said how many times they requested the database and were willing to pay $12,500 each time?
I would be only doing by memory, but I think it was somewhere in the range of 30. But it was, that was one group. I'm sure that WEC could possibly tell us
Okay,
how often.
so this goes back to that same $12,500 for database.
That's the
requesting.
capped amount for the full voter list of the state of Wisconsin.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I
Sure,
appreciate
no problem. Representative Biesfeld, you had one more question?
Yeah, thank you. Probably a couple of them mixed in here.
Uh-oh.
As I sit and listen here, as our guest has been questioned here, I would have to frankly say I'm a bit dismayed. I consider you my friends, and I'm bothered by the fact, I'm sorry I'm not asking him a question. Is it okay if I address across the table? I want to do things in order here. But, he's taken time out of his day, whether he's representing a client or representing himself. He doesn't deserve to have his integrity challenged because he comes here and shares a concern that he has. It's just inappropriate. Why do we need to do that? I don't do that in my committees. I think you've been in my committees, and if you served on them or not, I don't do that. I don't allow my members to do that. So it's just disappointing to me that a citizen of Wisconsin should somehow be made to feel shame that he comes and he shares information about a concern he has. And it's an important concern. So I'm not gonna go much longer on this, but he has brought interesting information here, and I'm thankful that he did. If somebody stepped to the table here, if it was Megan Wolf, whoever it was, who was supposedly on the other side as me, I would never treat them that way. It's just inappropriate. So I'm maybe a little off target here and don't want to be the taskmaster with the tongue lashing. But I thank you for coming and bringing the information. This is interesting. This is the sort of information. You did not accuse anybody. You started out by saying at the beginning, you're not accusing anybody of anything. You're just looking for explanations here. And I think we can agree here. You said Megan Wolf or somebody at WEC should come in. 100% agree with you. No problem with that whatsoever. So my question would be is would you commit to, if the invitation is given, that you call over there and say, we need you to come in here? Because the impression I'm getting is that request has been made. Yeah, she did come one time. I was here, I remember it. Okay, that request has been made other times and it's been refused. So will you commit to encouraging them to show up here?
Representative, I appreciate that very much. And so, we will be glad to have WEC come in and explain. We have a lot of the material to talk about now, and I appreciate everybody coming in and being able to present this. This is not a gotcha situation. This is their data. We want to understand it. We want it transparent. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. We should understand and know how it works. If that's fair. Representative.
Yes, the answer to your question is yes. It's my understanding that Megan Wolf is challenging a subpoena that asks her to appear behind closed doors, not in front of this committee. If she is invited to appear in front of this committee to talk about the data we heard today, I will absolutely encourage her to come and to bring her IT experts who could help speak to it.
I think we'd all be interested.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yes, Representative.
I agree. I just want to clarify, if the chair could please clarify for us. And I'm not referencing the subpoena that's behind closed doors. Has WEC been asked to come before this committee and refused? Because that's what I just heard, and I was not under that impression.
I have not asked.
Right, I know, that's why I want this clarification, because I think it might be a misimpression.
So I did not ask WEC for this committee, for this informational hearing, but I have no doubt that we will now hear a response for them, and I,
Sure, but have they refused to come when you've invited them in the past?
you know
I mean,
what?
With the exception of a potential date.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I can tell you from this one, no, I did not invite them, but I have no problem asking them again.
Sure, and I mean, I think that you would remember if you had invited them and they refused to come, so I don't want that I mean, I know there's millions of people watching on Wisconsin Eye and everything, I don't want the misinformation out there that
You know
WEC is
what? We will-
refusing to talk to us if they haven't refused to talk to us, and I don't think that's the case.
Unfortunately, most of the information that goes back and forth is in written form and has not been in personal communication. But I think this opportunity has allowed us to have a whole plethora of information to have conversation
And
about.
I look forward to a future hearing.
I agree with that as well. All right. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Dan Eastman, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
All right, with that, we're gonna just do the quick switch here, right? 2:00, I was supposed to make the switch here to 2:00 coming and gone. I'm gonna change this to the committee meeting on special counsel. And I do believe you should have a copy of it, but we do have one as well.
Did you bring this? I have one.
This one a little bit short, is there a reason I need to?
No, you can just, ask for motion to.
I'll have ledge counsel go through this briefly.
I have it somewhere, but if I'm not, like.
And this is just a committee motion. I'll let council briefly go through it.
Sure, so this motion contains 6 items, and each of which basically authorizes the committee to, authorizes the Office of Special Counsel and Justice Michael Gableman as the special counsel to assist the committee. It sets some guidelines for procedures that could be undertaken by either the committee or the Office of Special Counsel. And it basically clarifies that there are certain steps that the committee would like to see, basically setting rules for the committee to proceed in its investigation by authorizing the Office of Special Counsel for assistance.
Fair enough. Are there any questions? Representative.
Yes, I guess just to start with, I understand from press reports that it sounds like Speaker Voss is in negotiations with Michael Gableman about extending his contract past December 31st of last
I would
year.
not know about that, sir.
Well, I guess my question is, does this committee or the legislature or the speaker have a current contract with Michael Gableman? And if not, how are we authorizing working with him as special counsel if his contract as special counsel expired on December 31st of last year?
Well, I mean, the speaker is aware of this and ledge counsel, so I guess at this point there must be an extension. I mean, I have not seen anything, so I'm not aware of it, but obviously since it is with Justice Gableman and some level of authorization, he must still be working for the next couple
So
months.
you've worked with the speaker's office on this motion?
Yes. Oh, I should say, he is certainly aware of it. We went through ledge counsel and they were kind enough to help us through getting this through. Yeah.
I mean, Speaker Voss personally in the press yesterday seemed to disavow any involvement in this. Is there someone else in his office you've been working with?
I actually spoke to him this morning about it, and so he is aware of it.
Okay.
I think it was more taken out of context, so do you have a question about this in front of us?
Yeah, I guess, can I ask the council a question?
Sure.
Do you have copies or are you aware of the current contract status of the special counsel with the legislature?
I don't have any copies of any current contracts.
Okay. And so is this committee able to take the kind of action this motion contemplates with regard to a special counsel if that special counsel doesn't currently exist?
I think that to the extent that the special counsel is authorized by Assembly org, then this committee can direct its movements, right? It can direct a sense of guidelines for how it proceeds. To the extent it is not, I don't think that this particular committee is independently authorizing that.
Okay. And then, Madam Chair, is this motion intended to be backdated or just forward-looking? And I guess the reason I ask that is obviously we're in the middle, or I hope toward the end of the special counsel's investigation, and it seems like this would have been something maybe we did on day one. You know, what prompted it now, and does it apply to actions in the past or just forward-looking actions?
You know, I don't know how you can answer that question legally. I mean, I'm not sure.
Ledge counsel, feel free to.
Well, I think as the motion is adopted today, it takes effect today.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm a little bit hung up on the same issue of how we're authorizing somebody who doesn't have a contract to do something. That said, I just want some clarification on the financial implication of this. I think that we have spent upwards of $600,000 of taxpayer money so far on this special counsel so-called investigation. Is that correct?
I don't think that, I think they've only spent 100. I think last report that we heard from Justice Gableman was 160,000, so.
Is that council, can you talk about what they've spent? I have no knowledge.
You don't know, and there's no actual reporting to the world.
Well, like I said, the last time.
Well, he testified.
I thought, but I thought media reports since then quoted somewhere like in the $670,000 range it's been spent on the special counsel
So, well,
investigation.
Representative, would you like me to answer that? Or?
Sure.
So 670,000 has been authorized, but I believe only 170,000 has been spent as of the last report that we heard. Okay?
Only 170,000.
Well, I'm
Just, it's ironic that minutes ago I wrote down this figure. You
Okay.
said $100,000 was an exorbitant amount to fix the database. And now
no, it was
only 100.
Representative, I get to clarify.
Yeah, no.
It was 100,000 to get the information, not to fix. 100,000.
12,500 to get the
Get
information.
No, to get the information from the Wisconsin Election Commission that we asked for about the ability to switch active from inactive was $100,000.
All right, so my point is, we're throwing good money after bad with this so-called
It has not been
investigation.
spent yet.
This election has been litigated, this election has been audited,
Mhm.
and now we have this amorphous investigation that started with the Speaker's office, relates to this committee, that clearly from.
Okay, do you have a
reports is
question
just
on this
going
document?
So my question is, what is this going to cost us? What's going forward? How much taxpayer money are we gonna be spending on this investigation?
This is a motion. I don't think this motion costs anything at the moment.
But if this motion is approved and these things happen, these things cost money. The things that the motion involve paying a special counsel to do these things, what's that gonna cost? Do you have an estimate?
I do not have any financial estimate other
Do
than.
you have any financial authorization from the
No.
Speaker of the Legislature or the Committee on Organization?
Okay, if you're gonna ask questions, don't just ramble them
All right,
one to
go ahead.
another.
Go
Fair enough?
ahead, sorry. I
So
thrown a couple together.
670,000 has been authorized. Last time we heard 170,000 had been spent. I cannot tell you, we could certainly ask Justice Gableman what the current number is, if you would like to do that. But I am talking about the motion today as a yes or no vote. Do you have any further questions about a cost? I cannot tell you at this point.
Sure, I guess I would question the responsibility of voting on a motion that has an indefinite and indeterminate cost attached to it, so. I don't know if that's not really a question, but I would question it.
Okay. Representative.
To my earlier question about doing this now after obviously the special counsel has been here for months, I guess what did prompt this motion? What are you hoping to accomplish with this motion? What's the goal behind it?
This motion was a collaboration between Justice Gableman and myself.
And what are you hoping to accomplish with it?
I think that he wanted a set of rules going forward.
Okay.
Okay.
And I guess looking at clauses 3 and 4, I'm trying to understand what the goal is here, because as I read clause 3, I really liked it because it talked about people possibly testifying in open session in front of this committee, which
So you
obviously
like 3 but hate 4.
yes, and they seem really at odds with each other. I mean, so what is your intention in terms of where you are hoping that any subpoenaed testimony takes place? Is it in front of this
I think this
committee?
is
Is it
about
behind
getting-
closed doors?
I think that would be left into the investigator. And I think the point of this is to make sure that we have that there's the ability to bring forth information. And that at the end of the day, I think adding light to all of the questions that we've had, including the mayors from Green Bay and Madison and Milwaukee, and having that opportunity, I think is ultimately the opportunity for transparency and answering questions.
But I mean, if we want that transparency, if we want the questions answered, it seems like all of these lawsuits that are happening where people are being subpoenaed to testify behind closed doors. and
That's
then
not a
they're-
lawsuit.
No, but then the lawsuit is when they then challenge those subpoenas because they think that they should testify in public in front of this committee and not behind closed doors.
Gotcha.
We could avoid all of that, and I think even Representative Kurtz on your side of the aisle, I think endorsed the idea of let's just have all these people come in and testify in front of the committee. So I understand you say that the special counsel will make that decision, but if this is a motion of this committee, this is our opportunity to say, no, let's bring them in front of this committee and let's get this
Again,
done.
Representative, I'm gonna go back to the fact that the mayor of Green Bay, I've asked multiple times to come in. He refuses my calls, refuses my emails, and has not come before this committee after, quite frankly, taking a shot at me personally. So I understand what we would all like, but the question is, do you want to vote on this that's put before us, understanding that you like number 3, but not number 4, or vice versa? That is the question that we have before us right now.
And Mike, what I'm saying is, if you really want the mayor of Green Bay or anyone else to come here, then work with the speaker, subpoena them to come in open session in front of this committee, and let's all hear them. That's what number 3 says.
Okay.
But that isn't what this what this motion as a whole says. What this motion as a whole says is that we're still going to be subpoenaing people to go to a liposuction clinic in Brookfield, and they're still going to say, no, I want to do it in public, not behind closed doors. And that's why we've already heard that this special counsel's investigation is likely to drag on well past the end of session,
Okay.
and we could end this right now.
Well, I appreciate your concerns. Are there any further questions? That being said, we'll take the vote.
Representative Brancham,
Aye.
Representative Sanfilippo, Representative Tussler,
Aye.
Representative Thiesfeld,
Aye.
Representative Murphy,
Aye.
Representative Roser.
Point of order.
Point of order, please.
Sure.
Did we have a motion and a second to accept this?
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
Well, too long of a day. You've got it. Do I have a motion
So
to
those were-
go forward with,
Okay, Murphy's.
I'll second.
and second? Thank you.
And a second, okay.
Look what you got.
Representative Roser,
Yes.
Representative Spreitzer,
No.
Representative Subek,
No.
Representative Emerson.
No.
The motion passes.
And with that, we are going to conclude today's hearing. Thank you for your patience, everybody.